Yeah, this is a beautiful window, isn't it? This came out of the Centro Espanol building in West Tampa. It was built in 1912. This window, therefore, is 109 years old, and I'm like really honored to be able to work on it. And so it's a 109-year-old artifact that it was created by craftsmen who built it by hand. And so we're gonna honor its life, and putting it back together. And I just wanted to like study it a little bit with you. So, because it's got some issues, we're in the back of the museum right now where lots of stuff is going on. So you hear some sounds going off. That's what's happening. So this window has been out of the opening before, okay? And you can see we've got it stripped of the majority of the paint on the outside, but this yellow stuff that you see, stuff like this is some kind of a filler that was put in, I don't even know when, but maybe when it was done. I think the windows were quote unquote restored in the 80s, okay? So perhaps that's when it was put in, 1986 or something like that. It's lasted pretty well, okay? But look, it's got, that yellow is like a skim coat of some kind of epoxy or something. And it's held up, Glad that it's held up so well. It doesn't show any signs of coming off anytime soon. So that's pretty good, right? So, what's interesting too, like this corner is broken off and we're gonna have to address this somehow. But look at this whole arch. That was cut with a bandsaw out of one board, okay? And if you look at the width of that, it's gonna be like 10 or 12 inches wide, of the piece of heart pine. It makes me wonder what happened with this middle piece. I bet you the piece they cut out here made these pieces. See that? That would be really cool. So, what's interesting to me on this, is sorry, I was looking at some other things, but like there's spaces opening up right here, and it makes me wonder, to what level of precision it was initially put together. I mean, I can move this a little bit, okay? So I move this back to where it's supposed to be, right? And then I have to push this rail upwards and reattach it. Will it even stay? It's a good question. You can see here, I've got gaps down there that we have to take care of. Let's see, maybe, look, it's loose, right? So I'll have to figure out how to put that back together. So what do you think? Lots of little things here. Look, little chunk taken out there. I can squeeze this together like it's supposed to be. That was repaired once. This here is probably as close as it was at one point in time. I mean, how do you say it? I mean, that's probably where it was when it was first assembled, right? You've got this here. I wonder what happened there. Maybe that's a scar from scraping it. I'm not sure. So we got to tighten all this kind of stuff up. So here's something. This is a chunk that came out. And this is, I'm about to put a Dutchman in here. You can see how the grain goes around that way, and so therefore the defect follows the grain. And see how the grain is splitting here? It's split right there, and so this came off over 100 years, I guess. So it's interesting thing. So I'm gonna have to cut this out and put some kind of a Dutchman in there. You know, so shouldn't be too hard. And this here, you know, this is the same, this repair here is the same as the one that's down there, okay? Where the grain is split off and you know, they put a filler piece in there, and this is, you know, really glued in there. So that's one of the, this is, it looks like it's either an epoxy or something, like I was saying before. But that's one of the problems with using epoxy to fix corners, is that the epoxy fuses everything together, and then often you can't get it back apart again. But fortunately, you know, the joint has broken again there, and so I can, the tenon is still intact. If you see the tenon or not, you see it in there. So I can whittle this back down to where the tenon was and start over again. And now I'll weave a Dutchman into here using the same type of wood and glue it in place. A Dutchman is a cosmetic repair, you know, where the piece I put on will be actually a little bit bigger, and then I'll shave it down to match, you know, the being plain with everything else and match the profiles. So I'm gonna turn it over now. Just give me a second. Okay, so this is what it looks like from this side. And you can see it's not in too bad a shape here. It does have some, is those termite holes? This is a termite hole. Termite hole right there. Termites. Yeah. So a little bit of termite damage right there. That's a screw hole where it was screwed into the jamb. So this artifact is definitely museum quality. Squeeze that back together. Fill that piece in. And so here's the question I have: is, you know, the photographs of this picture, they indicate that these once opened, and I can't figure out, you know, how they opened. And what I mean is, since they opened, they would open to the inside, you would expect to see some kind of a shadow of a hinge here somewhere, but there's no shadow anywhere. And this piece right here, this is the bottom rail, you would expect this to be a little bit wider, but it's not very wide, and it's got this huge rabbit cut out. And it makes me wonder if that rabbit was cut out sometime early on. I don't know when, but, you know, and then reframed in the opening. It's a good, I don't know. It's a good question. So, what do you think? Oh, so there's some of that termite damage there. Fill that in. So another thing that we're going to do with this is, after 100 years, this wood has become really dry. You know, what happens is, you know, the water entering a sash like this, it will enter from, you know, the other side, okay? You know, it'll enter from this side and the glazing side, and it'll saturate the wood. But then with the introduction of air conditioning, the air conditioner will pull the moisture through the wood. And as it pulls the moisture through the wood, it also pulls the oils in the wood with it. And so the wood gets really dry over time. And, you know, with the sun baking it and stuff like that, sweating, and the wood dries out. So we're going to reintroduce some oils to it to give it a drink and give it some new life. So, but that's after we do the repairs. Okay. Again, this is that split. You can see it. That's not going to make it. I'm going to have to take that off and put a new piece in there. And you can see, I mean, the joinery is still tight. What's interesting too is a lot of people think that, here's something, is that a lot of people think that these pieces are mortised in, but really they're just sitting on here superficially, and that's a nail holding it in, okay? Took some real skill to be able to nail these muntins in place without splitting it, and apparently, you know, it did split there. That's around this nail head here. As the nail rusts, it secretes a mild acid, and the acid eats the wood fibers a little bit, creating a bigger space where water can penetrate and take with it, what would you call it? Like fungal spores and things like that, things that want to eat the wood. But that's a nail hole right there, holding this muntin in place. You know, we'll set that in and fill that with some epoxy there. So anyway, a bit more termite damage here. Look at that joint there. See another split opened up there, but that's not, that's an old split there that just opened up. You can see the filler inside. So, that's interesting. What's this? I wonder what this is a shadow of. Maybe that's some termite damage that was filled in. Probably so. You know, the other thing too is if these guys were originally functional, okay? And here's a good question. There would be latch marks right here. There should be some screw holes here to hold the latch. So I don't know, maybe this one wasn't functional and I was just mistaken. But I would assume that it was, because the big ones above it were functional. So if it was functional, there you would see the shadow here, even though it's been painted. You'd find some screw holes in a pattern that would betray that hardware was there once before. So maybe it wasn't functional. But I have to believe that at one point in time this was bigger. You know what I'm saying? I mean, because look how skinny that is in relation to, you know, that, for example. You know what I'm saying? So usually this piece down here is, you know, wide, like 2 1/4. I mean, this here looks to be about 1 inch, you know, plus 3/4. So maybe it's 1 3/4 inches. You know, maybe it's a 2 inch in its full width, but I would think it would be 3, you know, or so. Like here, just for example, here's another artifact down here. Okay, this is a demi-lune type window here. You know, see how wide the bottom rail is there? Okay, that makes sense, right? And give it a little bit more proportion and a little bit of meat to it. So anyway, glad I had that example on hand. All right, so I'm going to have to start some repairs on this pretty soon. The first repair I'm going to do, I'll try to capture it on video, is going to be, you know, this guy here, and then do the both corners. Let me turn this around here. Okay, you know, I'll have to do this corner here. I have to do this here. I have to, you know, fix this corner here, and then I have to take a clamp and I have to squeeze all this together so that it's tight again. So this has to be repaired, okay, as well as the other corner, so that we can pull this is a rail, we can pull this rail upwards to be tight with these joints again. You see that? Okay. So, you know, and then it doesn't need much up in this area here, but that makes sense. And the reason why it makes sense that there's not a lot of repair up top is because water starts at the top and it flows down and it sets in these areas here, okay? So, and it creeps into these corners. You know, any place where there's a joint, you know, a perpendicular joint right there, that's a place where water gets in and attacks the joint, okay? You know, the water will take the fungal spores in there and they'll eat whatever it can. But this, you know, this wood is really, really good. So there's hardly any fungal rot. I don't think there's any fungal rot on it at all yet. So we want to keep that from happening. So, but that's where the water congregates, you know, right in these corners, right in these pockets, because, you know, you've got a nice place to slide down here, you know, and, you know, creates a nice place where it can, you know, soak the heck out of this thing. So, and over time, you know, sure. I mean, expansion and contraction, that's another thing too, is what happens is, you know, where there's expansion and contraction happening here, okay? If this is worked on, you know, where the wood is expanded and then contracted and there's a small crack there, painters will often fill the crack, right? And that will prohibit the wood from then shrinking back to where it was. And then 10 years later, 20 years later, you know, it's shrunken and expanded and shrunk in that same spot. And with that filler in there, and then there's another crack, and then it gets filled again, and then it gets filled again and again and again over, you know, 100 years. It's no wonder you've got a crack this big, you know, if you follow, you know, that reasoning there, you know, just work over time. So, because, you know, any painter who's painting this or working on this is working on this sash from this side mostly, you know what I'm saying? And they're going to notice any expansion and contraction from this side because this is the side that gets the weather. So, all right. Well, I think I'm going to end it here. That's the first of 14 of these, you know, we have to take out. So we got 13 more to look at and to address. Some of them, who knows? Some of them might be rotted to the point where we have to build a whole new one. I mean, I hope not, but, you know, I hope so. Well, you know, because it's kind of fun to build this, you know, these kind of things, but, you know, it takes time to get the setups and stuff, and wouldn't that be a fun video to follow along with? So, all right, appreciate you guys following along. Love you guys, and I'll check back in with you really soon. Over and out. Bye.